The French Revolution was one of the most major events in world history. It changed how governments worked, challenged the power of kings, and influenced revolutions around the globe. But it didn't start overnight. It was years of unfair treatment, economic disaster, and political failure that led to France collapsing from a monarchy into something entirely new. Let's take a trip back to the late 1700s, to 1789, when France was in serious trouble. At the time, French society was divided into three classes called estates. The first estate was the clergy, the church. The second estate were the nobles, the wealthy and titled. And the third estate were everybody else, from poor farmers to city workers to the rising middle class known as the bourgeoisie. The problem? The first and second estates made up only 3% of the population, but held nearly all the power and land. They also paid no taxes. The third estate made up 97% of the population and paid all the taxes, even though they were the poorest. To make things worse, France was basically broke. The country had spent a ton of money helping the American colonies fight the British during the American Revolution, and on top of that, King Louis XVI and his court were spending ridiculous amounts on luxury parties and palaces. Meanwhile, regular people were starving. Bread, the main food of the poor, had become too expensive. A single loaf could cost a whole day's wage. There was anger, there was hunger, and there was no change. So, in May 1789, King Louis XVI called a meeting of the Estates General, a political body that hadn't met in 175 years. He hoped they'd help him fix France's financial problems, but it didn't go how he planned. Each estate had one vote. The first and second estates always voted together, so the third estate had no real power. Even though they were the majority of the country, the third estate had had enough. On June 17, 1789, they declared themselves as the National Assembly, saying they stood for the true people of France. 3 days later, they were locked out of the meeting room. So they met in a nearby indoor tennis court and made a promise. This became known as the Tennis Court Oath. They vowed not to separate until they had written a new constitution for France. The king didn't take them seriously, but the people did. On July 14, 1789, angry citizens in Paris stormed the Bastille, a prison that symbolized royal power. They freed prisoners and took weapons. This event marked the beginning of the French Revolution, and today, July 14th, is still celebrated in France as Bastille Day. In the months that followed, the revolution gained momentum. On August 4th, 1789, the National Assembly abolished feudal privileges, ending the rights of nobles to demand work or taxes from them and peasants. On August 26, they passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which said that all men are born free and equal and that sovereignty belongs to the people, not the king. But King Louis still held power, so in October 1789, thousands of women marched from Paris to the Palace of Versailles, demanding bread, and forcing the royal family to move to Paris where they could be watched more closely. By now, Louis was panicked. On June 20th, 1791, he and his wife Marie Antoinette tried to flee the country in disguise, but they were recognized and arrested in the town of Varnes, then brought back to Paris as prisoners. Trust in the king was gone. In 1792, France declared war on Austria, and things got even more unstable. Many revolutionaries believed the king was working with foreign enemies to crush the revolution. On August 10, 1792, a mob stormed the king's palace and arrested him. Later that year, France officially abolished the monarchy. The first French Republic was born on September 21st, 1792. Then came one of the most dramatic moments of the Revolution. On January 21st, 1793, King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine after being found guilty of treason. His wife, Marie Antoinette, was executed on October 16th the same year. After the king's death, things did not calm down. They got worse. Foreign countries attacked France, fearing revolutions might spread to them. Inside France, political groups fought for control. The most powerful group, the Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, began what's known as the Reign of Terror. From September 1793 to July 1794, thousands of people were arrested and executed for being enemies of the revolution. This included former revolutionaries, nobles, priests, and even ordinary citizens. Over 17,000 people were officially executed, often with little or no trial. People lived in fear, not knowing if they would be next. Eventually, Robespierre himself was arrested and executed on July 28, 1794. The Reign of Terror ended. By 1795, a new government called the Directory took over, but it was weak, corrupt, and unpopular. France was still at war with much of Europe, and the people were tired. That's when a young military general began to rise through the ranks. His name, Napoleon Bonaparte. On November 9th, 1799, Napoleon conducted a coup, a sudden takeover of power. He ended the revolution and proved himself as the leader of France. Eventually, he would crown himself Emperor of the French in 1804, starting a whole new era, the Napoleonic era. But even though the revolution ended in a dictatorship, it had changed France forever. It destroyed the old system of monarchy and privilege. It brought in ideas of freedom, equality, and the rights of citizens. It inspired revolutions across Europe and America. And it showed the world what ordinary people could do when they stood together to demand change. The French Revolution was loud. It was messy. It was often violent, but it reshaped the world. Oh my god, I can't believe I did that in one take.